a warm welcome to this second webinar of this autumn of our educational series. Today we are talking about real-life examples, real-world examples, and concentrating on single athlete use cases. The session will last about 30 minutes. The session will be recorded. You will get automatically the recording to your email if you need to leave at some point, so you will get the recording. And there's the possibility to ask questions, use the Q&A box, and we have time then at the end of the webinar to go through these questions. If we don't, we will answer those later via email. Good. My name is Wenning, exercise physiologist here at Firstbeat and customer success manager, making sure that our customers can apply the data into their daily processes and use the data in use cases like we are going through today. On today's agenda, we have 3 different use cases. We have one where a new player is coming to the team in season, how we are evaluating that. Then we have a return to play case, and then we have a bit rarer one or quite rare one where there's the finding of tachycardia on an athlete. And lastly, the Q&A, as mentioned. Let's start with the first use case. So there was an athlete coming to a team in season, to a pro ice hockey team, because there were a lot of players injured at that time in the team, and they needed to get some fresh athletes on the ice. And the incoming player was known to be good on the ice, so highly talented, but it was also known that his working moral wasn't on the best level. The head coach wanted to get him straight to play, straight on the ice. Just, if I remember right, there was one training before the first game. And of course, the strength and conditioning coach wanted to know that on which level the player is currently in terms of conditioning to make the load progression right for him. And to plan his further progression in the team. S&C coach started to evaluate the athlete by looking at his game data. And he compared the athlete that came in, so we are talking about him as the athlete B in this webinar, to the athlete A, which he knew that he was in a good shape. So the athlete A had a VO2 max of 65 milliliters per kilogram per minute, and for the athlete B, it was unknown. And when we look at the first game heart rate chart, we can clearly see that the red athlete, so athlete A, is clearly recovering better between the shifts than the athlete B, the blue athlete in this case. And what is important here to note is that the strength and conditioning coach had the real max heart rate of the athlete from the former club of the athlete, and also the athlete confirmed that this is his real max heart rate. If we wouldn't know it, that would make things a bit more complicated, because then you would need to adjust the heart rate to a couple of training games before the system actually know the max heart rate or do maximal testing, depending on what's available at that time. Another important point is that when a new player comes to a new team and probably wants to perform good, there could be some kind of excitement or some kind of anxiety to be seen in the heart rate chart, but we saw similar trends in further games and also in training. And when we look a little bit closer, so we see that the red athlete is recovering roughly to 50 or 60% of heart rate max, while the blue athlete is more in the range of 70%, even 80% of heart rate max during the shifts. So that's a quite big difference between these two athletes. The S&C coach wanted to dig a bit deeper to see or to confirm his thoughts about the conditioning state of the athlete. So here we have the comparison where we have, or they have played 7 games. And again, we have the athlete A and athlete B. And here we are comparing the heart rate recovery values for those 2 athletes. And we have selected here now 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and 120 seconds for the comparison to see that what's the trend over different time frames. You can see already a clear trend here. So the heart rate recovery values for the athlete A are much higher. So for example, on the 60-second time frame, athlete A has 80 beats in 60 seconds, whereas the athlete B has 44 beats in 60 seconds. And those are quite normal values for these athletes in the last 7 games recorded. So you know these based on the dots underneath the chart. So 80 is the last value recorded in a game, and then the dots underneath the chart represent the history values for each athlete. So for example, athlete A is here in the range of bit over 80 to 75 beats in 60 seconds, whereas athlete B is in the range of 42 to 48 approximately. But you probably have heard this before, but it's not fair to compare athletes with the absolute values to each other. So we are using the relative heart rate recovery to compare athletes. And the trend stays quite the same. You can see here again, it's 40% in 60 seconds for athlete A, 22% in 60 seconds for athlete B. And yeah, why it's not fair to compare the absolute values, because some athletes might have a max heart rate of 220 or 210. The other athlete could have a max heart rate of 190. And of course, the one with the higher max heart rate can recover more absolute beats than the athlete with 190. So always when you are comparing athletes, use the relative heart rate recovery. Then the coach dug even deeper. Here we have 4 weeks of data for heart rate recovery, and he took the max value for heart rate recovery during that time period. And you see that here the athlete B is the on place 7, so 7th worst heart rate recovery of the team. So he's in somewhere the worst 20% of the team. And another thing that the coach is to look at movement efficiency. So movement efficiency is movement load divided by trim, external load divided by internal load. And the trend stays the same. So the red athlete, the athlete A, has higher movement efficiency, better results as than athlete B in all of the sessions recorded during that 4-week time period. Summary of this use case, the incoming athlete was not recovering between shifts in training between intense bouts of exercise. The heart rate recovery was 18% worse than with the athlete A in 60 seconds. The heart rate recovery values were in the lowest 25% of the team, and movement efficiency seems to be constantly lower. And from that, the S&C coach made the conclusion that with this athlete, we should be carefully with the load management, and aerobic condition is needed, especially because he's a talented player playing high minutes, but the aerobic condition seems to be on a poor state. And then they had the chance to do a max test during a break. And for this athlete, the VO2 max was 50, which isn't a great number for an elite ice hockey player. Good. That was the first use case. Then we have a case about return to play. We have here's the case overview. We have an athlete in the best age in an elite ice hockey team, a very talented athlete, high playing minutes. He broke his wrist in a game and had to undergo surgery, and 8 weeks of return to play was targeted. How this presentation is set up, we go first through the return to play plan. Then we go through the exit criteria. Then we have a look at load management. Then we have a look at the evaluation. Have we met the exit criteria? And then we go to analyze the actual match values. Good. Let's start with the return to play plan, how it was designed. So on ice, the primary objective was to progressively build towards full intensity practice loads while carefully considering the stage of injury recovery. And the on-ice progression was the following: skating without a stick, skating with stick, puck handling, passing and receiving, shooting, team practice with no contact, then team practice with contact. And that's because of the nature of the injury, of course, the broken wrist. So you need to take those things into account. And the athlete returned to the ice as soon as it was medically feasible, with a strong emphasis on developing sport-specific performance alignment with the game demands. And the goal was to ensure readiness for return to play after the 8-week recovery period, pending medical clearance. What they did off ice was following. In strength and power training, they concentrated on maintaining or developing upper and lower and core strength, of course, injury adapted, on the things that you can do with the broken wrist. Endurance training, mostly on bike, aerobic base maintenance plus speed and anaerobic threshold work. And goal was, of course, support the on-ice performance and smooth return to play. Then after the athlete was able to return to ice, intense metabolic conditioning was done using trim targets on on-ice sessions and weekly targets. Here's the plan for the return to play process. So he had 3 weeks off because of the injury and then 5 weeks of training, which is good to highlight. At the beginning of the return to play phase, they did a sub-maximal fitness test, and then I have just highlighted some of the endurance sessions here. So they did, for example, volume intervals on bike, tempo endurance on bike, aerobic endurance, and this was also first time they went on the ice with the athlete, lactic aerobic endurance on the ice, and so forth. Quite a lot of aerobic work divided throughout the week in smaller parts. And what were the exit criteria? How the S&C coach ensured that they hit the targets, how they ensure that the player is ready for full game load. Or aerobic endurance, as said, they did the sub-maximal bike test, and then there they compared the heart rate exercise and lactate to pre-injury values, and then they also evaluated the sport-specific endurance, and there they had a look at trim and trim per minute in comparison to pre-injury values in standardized team sessions, so game day -1, game day -2, where they are usually doing pretty much the same things from week to week. And of course, they had also some other parameters for the neuromuscular system, like counter movement, jump, and so on, but we won't go through those. Then we are moving on with the return to play. So we are now in the load management phase. We have designed the return to play plan. We have decided the exit criteria. We start to train, and then we need to do, of course, load management during the return to play progress. And here you can quite nicely see when the injury happened. So here on the 11th of November, he broke his wrist early in the game. also low training load on that day. And then he had to undergo surgery, and then the training started progressively to increase in the first 3 training weeks. Then we have a short Christmas break, and then the training load starts to increase again. And after 5 weeks of training, we are roughly on the same level in terms of acute load here in the picture. So the black line is representing the acute load, the 7-day trimp sum, and then these bars, golden bars, are representing the trim sum of individual days, and then we having the balanced range, which is the chronic load multiplied by 0.8 to 1.3 to give you an estimate at where the load should roughly be. And then to give you more context, these red dots are representing games on the chart. So this looks pretty good in terms of progression. The load was constantly progressing towards the pre-injury values and looks good at this stage. Then we have a comparison about the training effects of the return to play athlete here at the top. And then we have the team average for the training effect underneath. And you can see that the return to play athlete was able to achieve quite similar training effects, although his training ability was decreased. So he had the broken wrist, so he couldn't do the same things, and he couldn't participate in team training. But in individual training with the strength and conditioning coach, they were able to replicate the training effects of team training and the games, which is quite an important part in terms of conditioning when you want to make sure that the cardiovascular system is ready for the game demands. So let's have a closer look on it. We have here on the upper chart a playing athlete on the 12th of December with the percentage of heart rate max. You nicely see the warm-up or auto warm-up, or nice warm-up first period, second period, third period, and then you have the movement intensity chart. And then we have a training session for the return to play athlete with some intervals as the main conditioning of that session. And when we look at the training effects of this game and this session, they are quite similar, although the athlete wasn't able to participate in that game, but his cardiovascular system reached same kind of stimulus, and they were able to improve the athlete's condition, although he was injured. What's the next step? So did we hit the targets with our conditioning, with our return to play plan? So first, we were looking at the aerobic endurance as one exit criteria. And here we have the submaximal fitness test results. So they did a test on the 1st of October, on the 4th of December, so straight after the injury or straight after the surgery, when the athlete was able to start training again, and then on the 15th of January. And now you can quite nicely see that the conditioning of the athlete was decreased after that 3-week off in November, and then it was around the same level in January as in October. So the lower the heart rate response with the similar external load, the better. And same kind of results can be seen also in the lactate and that they took straight after the test. So their submaximal protocol was 3 times 3 minutes on a bike. They started with 100 watt, then 150, then 200. And after that 200 block, they took the blood lactate. And here you can see the same trend as in heart rate exercise. Okay, the dates are wrong. but the story is the same. So on the 4th of December, they got the worst values, and then they improved again in January. Then we don't only want to have a look at aerobic endurance, also the sport-specific endurance matters, and actually it matters more than just the aerobic endurance. So the coach had a look at what our game day -1 looked now compared to pre-injury values. And when we are first looking at the aerobic training effect on the left side, we see that it's a bit higher on the 7th of January. I will just use the laser pointer to make it a bit more visible for you. So on the 7th of January, the anaerobic training effect was a bit higher than on all the other days pre-injury, or game day -1 days pre-injury. The same trend can be seen for trim, and a bit also for trim per minute peak 30 seconds. So the trim per minute peak 30 seconds is the highest 30-second intensity that is achieved during game day -1. But these are quite close still to each other. Then the coach had a look at the movement load, the external load parameters. So here we see a little bit increased movement load, which explains a bit also the increased trim and increased anaerobic training effect maybe. And the movement intensity peaks are quite similar. So this is also good that they were able to maintain the same intensity on game day -1 sessions after the injury as pre-injury. Peak 30 seconds is describing the explosiveness of the player, and movement intensity peak 30 seconds is chosen because the average shift in ice hockey is around 30 to 45 seconds. Then, good. So now the coach had numbers for the athlete to communicate with the coaching staff at what is his conditioning after the return to play phase. So aerobic endurance seemed to be on a good level, quite close to the pre-injury levels. So submaximal fitness test, heart rate exercise, and lactate, and then also the game day -1 values were quite on the similar level as the pre-injury values. So the player got green light and played the first game after the injury. And then, of course, you need to still monitor the athlete. How is he doing in games? Is there some increase in training load? So anaerobic training effect, quite on similar level. There's an increase in trim, so higher internal load in the first game after the injury. Intensity seems to be quite the same, or internal intensity seems to be quite the same. Movement load, quite on the same level. Movement intensity peak, a bit lower, not maybe that optimal, and movement intensity peak also a bit lower. But quite on the same level as pre-injury. So green light again, the player can still continue to play, but of course monitor his load. A bit increased trim in the first game after the injury. Good. Let's have a look at the summary of this return to play case. So first, there's the submaximal fitness test, which was done pre-injury. Of course, you don't know when the injury happens, so you want to do the submaximal fitness testing quite regularly. This team was doing it, not that regularly, every 4 to 8 weeks approximately, but still they got some reference value that they could use when the player was injured. Then the injury happened on the 11th of November. The player had to undergo surgery. The training load goes down. And actually before that, the training load is on a quite high level because a lot of games are played in a tough schedule. Then on the 4th of December, at the beginning of the return to play phase, there's the submaximal fitness test with poor results indicating a decreased fitness of the athlete. Then we have a nice progressive increase in training load when they start to train. Okay, this line is indicating when the player starts to train on the ice. The training loads are a bit higher than pre-ice training. Then when we move on, or actually in between, we have Christmas with a little break in training load. And then at the beginning of year 2025, we are roughly on the same level as pre-injury in terms of acute load. And there, before the game, we are comparing game day -2, game day -1 values to the pre-injury values to make sure that the athlete is in a good condition. And lastly, we are using the game values to compare again to pre-injury values to see that how he is reacting to the game load, to the most demanding phases. And then on the 15th of January, maybe a bit late, could have been done a bit earlier before the actual return to game, but now it was done a week later, and they got good results, and he could continue the training with the team. Takeaway from this real life case: always have a reference value. It doesn't need to be sub-maximal test. Of course, that's the best one. It can be also training, like here we used game day -2, game day -1 values to compare. It should be some quite standardized session so you can compare these values. The athlete was clearly able to improve his conditioning during RTP, so we started here from the poor results on the 1st of December, and then had good results on the 15th of January. And that's mostly because there was a nice progression in the training load, and the athlete was able to achieve similar training effects, similar cardiovascular load as the rest of the squad when they were training with the team and playing games. And the last point, as said, make sure the return to play athlete gets same kind of stimulus for the cardiovascular system as rest of the team to make sure he's ready. Then we have an interesting case, and a very rare case, but a very important case. So here the coach was able to spot exercise-induced tachycardia from the data. Here we have a couple of examples. So this is from a training, and here you can nicely see that there's an abnormal heart rate reaction. He is pushing his limit close to 100% of heart rate max, but here he is going clearly above the 110 of his heart rate max, and that's abnormal. You can already see it from the data. And this continued for a couple of sessions, couple of matches. So here we can see it as well, same kind of trend. And also the third example. And this was the coach noticed it when there was an identification that a new max heart rate was reached. And then the coach saw that it was something like 210, 218 or something like that. And that's clearly abnormal for this athlete. And the coach checked his data. Okay, this looks abnormal. And then they sent the athlete to clinical EGG. And they found out that there was an exercise-induced supraventricular tachycardia. And it didn't affect the training, so he had to undergo regular check, but luckily got permission to continue training normally. And I have to highlight here, Firstbeat is not a clinical diagnostic tool, but its data might reveal some abnormal heart rate conditions, but it won't detect all of them. if you notice something like this, always have a talk with the athlete if you see something abnormal, and easily forward the athlete to the experts. I wanted to bring this up here because this is a very important thing. If you notice something like this, always have a talk with the athlete and forward the athlete to the experts. Good. Now we have time for some questions. I also have one question for you. And at the same time, I'm promoting our webinar tomorrow with Sean McLaren, Martin Bouchet, and Gilles Chouchen. They had an excellent webinar on the 14th. Highly recommend. And tomorrow they will have a more practical one about how to use sub-maximal fitness testing in a team setting, what things you need to take into account, how often you should do it, how to take the weather conditions into consideration, and so on. Highly recommend. If you haven't signed up, do it immediately. There's one question. What's your standard test to determine heart rate recovery? I don't use, or I don't suggest to use the standardized test to use with the heart rate recovery. Of course, you can do the sub-maximal fitness testing and then measure the heart rate recovery. But in high intensity sports like ice hockey, basketball, soccer, where you get very high intense actions and then you have a rest, you will get high heart rate recovery scores quite easily. Maybe, or you won't get the same kind of heart rate recovery values in each sessions, because not in each sessions you have the high peak and immediately rest after it. But if you take multiple sessions along a time frame into consideration, you will get the real max heart rate recovery values for each athlete. So I would just define the heart rate recovery values or the max heart rate recovery values from general training or from games and work with those. After 2 weeks, 4 weeks of data collection, you will have quite surely the real max or real heart rate recovery values for each athlete. Then, excellent question. Do you consider heart rate variability trends in return to play athletes? That's an excellent question, especially if there's an athlete, for example, with a concussion. There you need to be extra careful with the load progression, and their heart rate variability is a highly valuable tool. Also, if an athlete has been longer injured and his fitness has clearly decreased, you should be especially monitor the recovery of the athlete to see that how is he coping with the constant increase in training load. If it's this short of an injury as we had here, 8 weeks, it's not that significant to use heart rate variability. Of course, I recommend to use it always, even if there's not another injury. But again, as with the sub-maximal fitness testing, or as with game day -1 and game day -2 values, you want to have some reference values before the injury, especially in concussion cases, so you know that what are the pre-injury heart rate variability values, what are the post, and what are the heart rate variability values in the return to play, and in then after post-injury, especially in the concussion, where the concussion itself affects the heart rate recovery values. I hope that makes sense. Long answer to a short question. Here's the short answer. Yes, I would use heart rate variability in any case, even if it's not a return to play athlete. Okay, yeah. Thank you for the question. Time's up. We are a little bit over time. Seems like there are no more questions. I thank you for your time. And if you want to connect, if you want to have more practical examples, I am posting those regularly on my Instagram and on my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect there and maybe get some inspiration from those practical examples that I'm sharing there. Good. I hope you enjoyed this session. Join the webinar tomorrow and hope to see you soon. Take care.